Let's go ahead and get settled, and we're going to get ready for our next presenter. So, my name is Crystal Haney. I use she, they pronouns, and I am the Community Outreach Specialist for the Office of LGBTQ Affairs. Very, very excited to be here today. It is my privilege and honor to introduce Jack Beck, who is the founder and executive director of Turnout. Turnout is a nonprofit dedicated to mobilizing communities to power queer and trans movements. Jack started his career in HIV services at AIDS Project LA and went on to lead the community or communications department at M-PACT, where he had the privilege of working with hundreds of queer and trans grassroots organizations around the world. In 2015, Jack left his job at M-PACT to start Turnout. That organization works to build community power to support queer and trans grassroots work at every level. Turnout now works year-round to recruit new volunteers, staff, and board members for queer and trans nonprofits, providing the training and support they need to maximize their impacts for our communities. If everybody could give a warm round of applause for Jack Beck.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay with the microphone? Okay, awesome. I am sitting on the ground because I didn't want to block this, but also it feels like kind of wild to be doing a mutual aid presentation, like talking at you from a stage instead of, I was like, let's set up a circle, it'll be so cute, and that's literally impossible. So if you want, it is going to be participatory, and feel free to move into the closer sections. I know everybody hates doing that, but you're invited to do it if you would like. So let me get my notes. And I'm also advancing the slides from here. Okay. Nice. Thank you for that introduction. I really appreciate it. I think what I want to start with is why I decided to start Turnout. I had worked in HIV for queer and trans people for like 10 years. And the reason I got involved was because as a queer young person, like I didn't really have any support that I needed. I couldn't go to my family. I couldn't go to like even our family doctor or my teachers or whatever. And when I ran into trouble as a queer kid, the only place that I could go was organizations created by and for queer and trans people who knew what we need and know how to deliver that. I think that is still the situation that we are in. I think especially today when we have a federal government that is not only actively, like selectively cutting off funding for anything queer and trans, but actively attacking our communities, fostering a culture war that recruits other folks to attack our communities. Like this is really, this infrastructure that folks have been building since the 80s and even before that arguably, I think is what we're going to be depending on for survival in the future, in the like very, very near future. And it has been that way for a while already. So recognizing that, I would meet people in my personal life who would hear that I worked in queer and trans organizing, and they'd be like, oh, I really want to get involved. There's like so much energy that was so apparent in our communities, but they didn't know where to go. Like Volunteer Match didn't really have queer and trans stuff, and just it was getting bottlenecked because there was no pathway to channeling that kind of raw energy into impact for our communities. So that's why I started Turnout, which was designed to create a pool of folks who are passionate about queer and trans issues. So when grassroots queer and trans orgs need them, we could just send out the call and send over anyone who was interested and who had the skills necessary. And that has worked pretty well. Over the past 10 years, we've built a community of roughly 5,000 volunteers in the Bay Area supporting about 150 orgs. And it's a huge range of organizations, from legal support and medical care to supporting our artists and documenting our history. No one else is doing that but us, and we need community power to make that work. So that's how we started, and that's how we've been operating. But over 10 years of doing that work and seeing the way volunteerism kind of operates in the wild, over time, we have chosen to shift to a model less focused on kind of nonprofit support and more focused on mutual aid. And that is kind of where I want to start, because that, I think, is a useful way to talk about, like, what is mutual aid? How is it different from traditional charity? How is it different from nonprofits? And, like, no shade to nonprofits, like, Turnout's a nonprofit. Like, we do a lot of work with nonprofits. We still recruit volunteers for nonprofits. You know, that is kind of the pathway that people have if they want to do work in the community. But the goal of this presentation for me is to kind of highlight what are the different options that we have, how are they different from each other, what are the challenges and opportunities that you get with each one, and why might mutual aid why might it be a good choice for certain types of projects. So that's my goal for this presentation. And as I threatened you all, it is participatory. So I am going to start with a question, which is, why did you all choose this session? You know, we are going head to head with GLAAD, which is one of, like, the most high profile organizations in the country, but you are here instead of there. Please, go ahead. Nice, awesome. I think I agree. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people are thinking that way now, especially as resources are draining. I think you were next. In the glasses? In the dark glasses? Were you raising your hand with the... Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Mm. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. You in the back had your hand up. In the far back, yes. Yeah, I think that's a great, I love that. Congratulations on the work that y'all are doing. And I think there are folks who are, like, it's not something I think people can just show up and do without, you know, there's ways to do this that are effective, and there's ways to do this that are less effective. And there's ways to do this that are terrible and bad. So I think those are the right questions to ask. Is your hand up?
To run the mic, and we're working on getting a second mic set up because we want to make sure.
So that it lasts for posterity in the record, I'm just getting even less far in that. I'm putting together some support space for queer educators in training so that as we move into education and in that role in a very embattled time, how can we make education work and be supported within the context?
Thank you all so much. It's so exciting to hear about the work that you're doing, and it's really cool to hear about who's in the room. So thank you for being here. All right, I am going to ask you another question. I really front-loaded a lot of the questions, but who here has heard of mutual aid before? Okay, good. And who here feels like they have a sense of what it actually means when someone says mutual aid? Okay, can I call on someone I haven't called on? Would you like to give a definition? Let me run the mic. Thank you for running the mic.
My daughter has taught me a lot about mutual aid. And so it's where you come together and you support the needs of the people around you and you bring to the table what you have to offer. And by bringing that, everybody else kind of brings what they have to offer. And then together you have what you need.
It's okay. You're going to get your steps in, that's right. In the process of building a stronger community of people and meeting each other's needs, respecting the complexities of the situation, who are the groups who are coming together for the purpose of mutual aid, and what are their aims and goals? How can we really work together?
I think those two definitions together, I think, do a really good job of kind of putting together what people tend to talk about when they, or mean when they're talking about mutual aid. So I have a couple of key, like 3 elements of mutual aid from Dean Spade. Do folks know who Dean Spade is? Yes, the Dean Spade fan club. You'll enjoy this presentation because a lot of this comes from Dean Spade. So. Dean Spade, for those who don't know, is a trans academic and activist. He's founder / co-founder of the Sylvia Rivera Law Project, does a ton of mutual aid, and is kind of one of the preeminent thinkers and writers about this topic. He has a book, which I actually have a copy here. I'm going to put it up at the end because especially for folks who are just trying to get involved and think about like how to do this stuff, it is such a good primer. It came out in 2020 during the pandemic when like I think people started talking about mutual aid a lot and seeing the need for it as like supply chains started crumbling and people realized like, oh dang, like the people who are in charge maybe are not as good at what they're doing as they say they're doing. So these are the 3 key elements that Dean Spade identifies as what mutual aid is. So the what is mutual aid projects work to meet survival needs and build shared understanding about why people do not have what they need. Why is mutual aid projects mobilize people, expand solidarity, and build movements. And the how is mutual aid projects are participatory, solving problems through collective action rather than waiting for saviors. I think, this is particularly relevant now because I think a lot of us are feeling like, oh, no one's going to come and save us. Like the government's literally shut down, which is probably better than it not being shut down because they're so much worse when they're actually doing stuff. So for this, for the first one, we're going to go through each of these in detail. The what, I want to give a couple examples because I think this really helps kind of clarify what we're talking about. I think the clearest example of mutual aid that people are going to be familiar with is the Black Panthers. This is, hometown team, which is, out of Oakland. People, I think, have heard varying things about the Black Panthers. I think the media really did a number on them. So, keep that in mind. Some stuff that I think people know about the free breakfast program probably more than anything. This was Black Panthers organizing to make sure school kids had free breakfast. That is not the image of like folks with weapons on TV that really like scared a lot of white people and, was designed to scare a lot of people. But the free breakfast program is what J. Edgar Hoover identified as their most threatening program because they recognized the power that it built, and they made sure to both attack the free food program. So when they were opening a chapter in Chicago, they literally sent police officers to urinate on the food before they gave it out the next day. And they worked to co-opt it into the government with a larger federal free breakfast program that still gives breakfast to like millions of kids, but is also under attack because it's not being done in a mutual aid model. It's being done through the government, which doesn't really work that way. But they also had a free ambulance program. They have free medical clinics, free rides for elderly folks who need to do errands, and a school, and this is, I think, very important, a school aimed at providing a rigorous liberation curriculum to children. So we're going to see that part of what is key about mutual aid is combining support for people in our communities with a political analysis for why we need support in the first place and why we don't have it. And like how to fix that, you know, instead of just kind of painting the walls of a system that is oppressing us, you know, as volunteerism, in my opinion, feels like much of it has become. You know, there's a shared analysis for how we change things for the better together. The other examples here are worker strikes. You know, when you're on strike, you're not making money. A lot of folks are taking care of each other. There's often strike funds. People are making food for each other. That's mutual aid. And then most relevant for, I think, my work is AIDS care. So in the 80s, when the government did not want to work on HIV, you know, people were fond of saying, AIDS, killing all the right people. You know, Reagan wouldn't talk about it. People knew that it was up to us to take care of each other because the people in power were not going to do it. And in fact, we're going to gleefully watch, you know, as we suffered and died. And we found ways to build clinics, to build food programs, to organize in a way that we could create the resources we needed for survival. And that infrastructure that was created during the 80s has been used as a model for all sorts of needs that queer and trans people have that are not being met by mainstream institutions. And a lot of those orgs, you know, the 150 orgs that we work with in the Bay Area are doing a lot of those things, you know, a huge range of things that, you know, no one else is doing for us and that we need to do for ourselves. So those are some examples of mutual aid. The next slide is why. Mutual aid projects mobilize people and expand solidarity and build movements. How does this work? So when you are doing mutual aid with a political analysis of why, you know, the care is needed in the first place, it really helps to break the stigma of what you're going through. Like a lot of traditional charity models, I think there is a lot of stigma involved in it. It's like, oh, like we're helping the less fortunate or like the needy, or, you know, literally the word charity case is pejorative for a reason. Like that doesn't feel good. It's so disempowering. But when you're talking about like the reason why we don't have what we need and how we can organize to fix that, it externalizes the issue from like personal responsibility to a systemic problem that we need to work on together. And that is, you know, as a gay man who has worked in HIV for a long time, like there's a lot of blame that goes into, you know, people who get HIV because it's your fault, blah, 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 whatever. Like that's not helpful for anybody. And it's really, it's destructive and bad. Also, working together builds trust and understanding across demographics. I think this is very exciting about mutual aid. I think you see this in research on like race relations in union work, for example. Like when workers are working side by side on the same projects, it's much harder to view people as other. Like you see the shared goal, the shared vision, and the shared humanity, and it really breaks down a lot of those false barriers that the media and the political establishment are so fond of, you know, inflaming because it, in my opinion, keeps the people in power because it divides us. And then building solidarity across issues is what makes movements big and powerful. And I think as queer and trans people, especially, we have a really powerful opportunity to do cross-movement work because we are in every demographic. We are in every racial group, every nationality, every class group, like every disability class. Like queer and trans people are everywhere, and in order for us to have queer liberation, we need Black liberation. We need liberation for people with disabilities. Like they're, you know, queer Black people, as long as they're being oppressed, we do not have queer liberation, period. So this is an opportunity for us to leverage that shared human experience to fight across these lines and build large movements. All right, the last slide. How mutual aid projects are participatory, solving problems through collective action rather than waiting for saviors.
One sec.
Yeah.
I'm gonna swap this out for you.
Sure. Oh, cute. Okay. Oh my God, I think I did this wrong.
No, that was fine.
That is
It's
okay.
just your glasses.
I'm gonna do this in order. Okay. Can people hear me? I think maybe it's this way. So it's closer to my mouth. I'm not a scientist. All right, cool. That is easier for me, thanks. Okay, how this works. Mutual aid projects help people develop skills for collaborating participation and decision making, like you were mentioning, like how do we do this? I don't think this is stuff that we learn, really. I mean, maybe you learn it very young in school, but when it comes to being an adult and learning how to work together with people, I don't think we're learning that. And in fact, I think a lot of our culture has kind of an antisocial streak at this moment that is encouraging conflict and encouraging techniques of coercion to get what you want instead of collaboration. So working on mutual aid projects together not only teaches you new skills for this, but helps to unlearn some of the kind of toxic cultural BS that gets inculcated just through like swimming in it all the time. And that is, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the mutual aid projects we've worked on, but we've been working on a shared mutual aid project called the Street Fair Coalition, which brings together SF Pride, Folsom Street Fair, and Castor Street Fair to share space. Like we have a warehouse together, we're sharing resources, we're building a labor pool to make sure the work of the fairs is going to local queer and trans people for like minimum $35 an hour gigs. So we're putting money back into the community. But working together is hard. Like, especially for a bunch of folks who are used to being on their own and kind of having dominion. And unlearning tools of like force and coercion and like learning how to genuinely trust the people that you're working with and open space for them to have agency just like you have agency, that is a challenge. And in fact, to me, it feels like the primary challenge of this work. And I think if we can find our way to doing that, and Dean Spade's book has a lot of good tips on that, there are also other writers who write about that, I think that is going to be essential to us creating the kind of power that is going to balance what is, the threat that we are all facing politically. I don't know how we face that without learning how to do those skills. But Dean Spade's book puts this, I think, in a very succinct way, which is we are both building the world that we want and becoming the kind of people who can live in such a world together. I don't think we can have those things separate. We need to become kind of new. We need to grow. We need to grow in this way if we're going to be able to do this and do it together. Okay. Where's my clicker? Okay. What time? How am I in time? 11:22. Okay, we're totally good. Nice. All right, so people who do mutual aid are fond of saying solidarity, not charity. We already talked a little bit about charity and how some of that's different. I'm going to highlight that, like some of the difference between charity models, nonprofit models, and mutual aid models. For folks who came in late, I am not throwing shade. That's not my intention. A lot of us work in nonprofits, including me, and a lot of us are in structures that use kind of a charity model, but I do really want to highlight some of the challenges with those models, and that's kind of the intention here. So, charity versus mutual aid. So one of the challenges with the way charity works in the U.S. is that the institutions of charity are often descended culturally and institutionally from the traditions of wealthy folks giving alms to the poor in order to like gain access to heaven. So like if that's the base that you're working from, like that's rough. That is not really going to lend itself to building community power because it's not interested in that. Like it's interested in making sure you as a person of means are doing the things you need to do to be a good person. And it doesn't really include like, are you solving these problems? Like, are they being solved? Are people getting what they need? It's like, I did my piece. The world is hard. The poor will always be with us. That is a challenge. And I think the primary challenge, in my opinion, just from the work that I've done, is that the charity model keeps the money and the decision-making power in the hands of the people who already have it. So the people who have money and who have power are deciding what gets funded, who gets money, what work is worthy of getting resources and being done, period. And that's a problem. Like it has the effect of only funding work that does not threaten people who are in power. And when you are in an increasing class inequality system, you're going to need work that is outside of that. Like, and I don't know how well charity is going to be a good vehicle for that. I do think, interestingly, churches, like traditionally have been a little better about that, but, you know, churches have their own problems. Like, oh, yeah, do you have a...
Hi. Having been in both deep liberation theology and Christian white supremacy, what is mutual aid here? My experience as a cult survivor is that the churches that discourage this want a monopoly on the community and the social infrastructure that it gives. So there's also some power there, especially because then you can make it conditional.
Totally. Oh, I don't have to wait for the mic to come back. That's nice. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of the most interesting kind of mutual aid work has come through some like religiously oriented stuff like liberation theology. There are movements here like that as well. But then you have these other churches that are focused on institutional power, and that creates like rot, and you know, that's where you end up with like hiding sexual abuse scandals where people are just being victimized in these communities of faith in order to protect the institution instead of the people that it's supposed to serve. So yeah, I think these are just some challenges with charity where it is very top down, you know, very we decide who gets what and not the community deciding what we want to build together, which I think is much more exciting. It also legitimizes systems that concentrate wealth. I don't know if y'all have heard of like effective altruism, which was in the news a lot during Sam Bankman-Fried's trial for like fraud and being, you know, kind of a terrible, shitty person. But like there are a lot of people who think, oh, I'm just gonna like work really hard, get rich, and then I'll like be a philanthropist and like help the world. But often the way you have to accumulate that money is by participating in systems that create the problems that you are then trying to fix. And there's a really interesting example of this from the Gates Foundation. The LA Times did an expose on them like a while ago. I think this, you know, this is a number of years ago, but it's split into two sides, which a lot of foundations are. You have your side for granting, and then you have your side that is like making money to give the grants. And this expose was like, oh, the side that is making money is investing in businesses that are creating the problems that this side is trying to solve. And so that kind of model just has a lot of limitations and a lot of vulnerabilities. And if you are going to engage in it, I think these are some things that really need to be taken into account. And also, please feel free to raise your hands and participate. It was such a great note. And, you know, in true mutual aid style, this should be collaborative. I did not print this for some reason. So, yeah, some challenges with nonprofits. It often, when you are in nonprofits, often there's a sense that like you have to have a degree or some sort of professional certification in order to participate in liberation work, period. Often it's single issue oriented. So you're like, you know, I've been an executive director for 10 years, and often people are focused on like, you need to drill down on one thing, don't get distracted. Like you're so often atomized and, you know, separated from other organizations, it really limits your ability to do work and to even be in conversation with other people doing the work. Work is often framed as who is deserving of care. So like there are some nonprofits that will force you to do drug tests if you're going to get like housing support, you know, whatever. That is not the vibe of mutual aid. It's not the vibe that I would like to participate in really at all. And it prioritizes methods that are palatable to elites that fund them. I think that there are a lot of things I have to say about this, but I think we've already talked a little bit about how there's just certain work that is not going to get funded because it is threatening, and I think people in power don't often mix with regular people who are part of communities, and I think there is a distance that makes them a little afraid and a little suspicious and a little feeling like they're not going to know what to do with the money. Like, why we're professionals, you know, we're so-and-so, you know, we know what to do. But I mean, when I did HIV work, I was doing international HIV work, so we were working with activists in low and middle income countries, you know, sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America, Asia, Middle East, North Africa. And there's not a lot of like local funding for queer and trans work in those places, so it's funded by like the Global Fund and the UN and PEPFAR. PEPFAR is George Bush's like probably one good thing that he did that doesn't exist anymore. But it gave a lot of money for HIV medication globally, but they had an anti-prostitution pledge. So you could not get that money if you were supporting sex workers who hadn't like declared that sex work is bad and they're not going to do it anymore, which is ridiculous and counterproductive and so moralizing. I don't have the words that I can say in public about how I feel about that, but I think that really shows where some of the constraints are using these models. But you can use nonprofit models to do more mutual aid style work or to kind of circumvent these problems. It's just often, a lot of the activists that I've worked with, they're in a position where they're like, okay, I need to get money, so I need to get grants. And that means I have to apply for a grant to do the thing that the grant maker thinks we should do, and then do that thing, but also stretch those dollars to do the things the community actually needs in addition, which are like basically not funded. And so you are doing so much work, it's not recognized, you're stretched super thin, and it's just a really hard model. I imagine some people in this room might have, been in that position. I think a lot of us have been. So, moving to just, I only want to briefly touch on our history as an organization because I think that it speaks to the promise of mutual aid versus traditional volunteering. I started as, a super hopeful, like bright, bushy-tailed, I'm like volunteering, like let's go, let's support the nonprofits. And over 10 years, what I started to see was we were sending volunteers out to like large organizations that are well-funded, who have an executive director that's making, 6 figures, and these people are like working a front desk for free, doing menial labor that they have no say in how it's done. They don't get any participation in like, what are we doing together? And it's super alienating, and like, why would anybody want to participate in that? Especially when people are struggling economically themselves, like giving free time when they could be working to like pay their bills. Like over the last year, almost every meeting that I've had externally, at some point during that meeting, someone's like, do you have a job? Like, do you know anyone who has any work? Like, people are so desperate for work in this economy. Like, it feels insane to me to ask people to volunteer for free unless they are participating actively and building what they want to build together. That feels ethical to me. More and more traditional volunteering does not feel super ethical to me. It feels extractive. And I think people feel that. Like, if you look at trends of volunteering across the past at least 10 years, like across the whole nation, it's going down. And people are, like, there are articles in mainstream newspapers about this. They're like, what is this crisis of care? Why are people not volunteering anymore? And I think if you look at how extractive, like, the entire system that we live in is, like, you can kind of, in a healthy way, you can really only give from your excess. And I don't think people have excess right now. Like, we are not being taken care of. We don't have what we need for ourselves. How can you ask us to give more to a system that is already like bloated and off kilter? Like, that to me feels too much to ask and unfair, and no wonder people are not interested in that. So that is why we have really made a shift from a focus on volunteerism to mutual aid and liberation work, to work with folks so that we can work together to build the skills and become the people we need to be to live in the world that we need to create. Because, like, the jerks in power, they're not going to do it for sure. Like, this is working for them just fine. And they are clearly, like, they're trying it. They're seeing how far they can push it, And I don't think we're going to be able to get to a point of pushing back without learning how to work together effectively. So that's the kind of project that I'm interested in working in. I imagine some folks here are also interested in doing that, and that's why you're here instead of at GLAD. But I'm very glad that you're here. And like, the thing that has been interesting to me about making this shift from volunteerism to mutual aid and starting to work in a more mutual aid model is that like when I will be at conferences where most of the sessions are like people talking at other people, like, and this is one of those sessions, so I'm not throwing shade at those people either, but like when you can do a real mutual aid session where you're talking with people and like, what does your community need? Like, what do you have? What can we build together? And like, after the meeting, how are we staying in touch? Like, when are we meeting again? How are we actually gonna, like, let's fucking go. Like, I'm tired of waiting. Like, let's do this now. Because, you know, there is no time to wait. Yes, go ahead.
I see this a lot with the language we use. How do we know that mutual aid isn't a rebranding of volunteering? Because I feel like we always change our language, and then when people get to the bottom of it, they're like, oh wait, this isn't that much different. We've just, you know, slapped on some words that make us feel good. So how do we distinguish between mutual aid? And I know you've been talking about it, but I just want to ask that.
Great question. I mean, I would say, like, how much agency do the volunteers have to direct the direction of the program? You know, like, is this a participatory shared process of deciding what we are going to do together? Or is there someone standing on a stage, like why I'm not standing on a stage, like telling you what needs to be done and telling you it's mutual aid? Because I'm sure, I hadn't even thought of that, but I'm sure people are doing that. Like, this is mutual aid and this is how we're going to do it. It's like, actually, no. Like, you're not doing it right. And that means it's not mutual aid. And there's a lot of, you know, I recommended this book at the beginning. I'm going to put it up at the end. There's a lot of like very clear hallmarks of what that is that I think, you know, once you have kind of that litmus test, it's very obvious what is like kind of the shitty old model and what is this new model. And I think what I was going to say in terms of like being in those conference spaces, it is really interesting when you have a space like that. I've had people come to me afterwards and they're like, everything else feels dead. This feels alive. Like, and that is how so much of this has felt to me for a long time, is this feels dead. Like, it is in a concrete building, like you can't participate, you're constrained by like these weird, you know, constraints that you don't have any say over, you can't even move. And this, to me, this work feels alive. And there is a quote from this book that is something that I feel expresses this really well and I think is really beautiful and is why I want to do this work. At our best, social movements create vibrant social networks in which we not only do work in a group, but also have friendships, make art, have sex, mentor and parent children, feed ourselves and each other, build radical land and housing experiments, and inspire each other about how we can cultivate liberation in all aspects of our lives. Activism and mutual aid should not feel like volunteering or like a hobby. It should feel like living in alignment with our hopes for the world and with our passions. It should enliven us. And that is how I feel about this work. I see people experience that in doing this work. I think if it starts to feel dead, that is a good hallmark for like, what are we actually participating in here, you know? So I think that that is a good way to kind of separate between those things. All right, so let me just do a time check. Yeah, we've got decent time. So just to give you a sense of like the two, you know, some examples of the mutual aid projects we're working on, I already explained one, which is the SF Street Fair Coalition, you know, getting together as street fairs, because we're all, like, every street fair is losing money right now. Like, the model is under strain. It's a challenge. So we're getting together to share our resources, make sure that we can survive, and leverage street fairs for what they were intended for in the first place. Like, a lot of people don't know that Folsom was founded in order to prevent gentrification and like essentially the Soma neighborhood from getting raised like other neighborhoods were during that time, like Japantown got raised. Like, that's why Japantown in San Francisco feels so weird, is that it got flattened and like rebuilt as a concrete kind of urban project. And Folsom Street Fair was created in order to prevent that, and it was successful. You know, Pride was created as an activist movement. There are a lot of opinions about what Pride has become in many ways, you know, with corporate over influence, et cetera. But that doesn't mean the bones aren't there to leverage it as a tool for liberation. I think it is still there. I actually joined the board of SF Pride last year, which I really didn't want to because everyone is mad at that organization all the time for very legitimate reasons, in many ways, but it had a beneficiary program where it allowed local grassroots groups to run beverage booths and sell booze and make money. And that's how Turnout got its first grant. No funders were interested in funding us because we don't really fit into that model. We made $6,000 in one weekend slinging beers at SF Pride. And so my condition for joining that board was bringing back that program, and we were able to give out more than $100,000 of grants to grassroots groups this year that have a very hard time getting funding anywhere else. So I think if we are intentional about it, we can leverage these things for our communities for maximum benefit. We are also hosting a new series, monthly meetings for mutual aid. So we're inviting folks in our communities who want to be involved with this, working together, seeing what people want to work on, like connecting people who want to work on the same things, building skills together, building resources. There are a lot of resources, but the siloing and atomization of it really prevents us from working together at scale. We have one coming up. I know probably most folks here are local. It's in Oakland, but I'm going to give you the invitation. I'm going to give you a QR code. We would love to have you. But I really wanted to leave some time to do a little bit of an exercise. I thought we might be able to move chairs, so that is not possible here, obviously. But I am really interested, now that we've kind of talked about mutual aid, maybe we can just kind of have this as a general discussion. And I'm sorry to ask, you're probably gonna be running around with a mic, so I'm sorry about that, but really appreciate it. But I'm curious to hear from folks who here has participated in mutual aid before? And yeah, I'd love to hear not only what you did, but your sense of what that enabled you to accomplish, and maybe even some of the challenges around it that you faced.
Yeah. The clearest example I have is the autism and ADHD community, where there are basically zero resources for adults that can be more or less independent. And the majority of the institutionalized help depends on a diagnosis, which is very expensive, and depends on this philosophy of basically assimilating into neuronormative society. And so we had to shift away to how to learn social skills from each other, how to have community when you feel deeply lonely, how to basically a lot of the non-material, a lot of non-material mutual aid that has been very liberating and not very high cost, like a lot of support groups, Discord servers, and it's been really cool to see and be in.
Awesome, thank you.
Hi, my name is Tristan. I am one of the leaders of a group called South Bay Queer Solidarity, and one of our big things we do is mutual aid. So we have a mutual aid group chat where people in the group, I think it was originally imagined as that people in the group would go in there and everyone would offer something. So I have a car, I can give people rides. I have a shovel if you need to do some gardening, and then people would ask for things. And we have definitely had some successful mutual aid of that kind of giving service. But one of the challenges we have run into is that the needs of our community are so great that a lot of people really what they need is monetary support. And essentially what we find is that what we are trying to do is recreate, basically the government, people need affordable food, and it's wow, it would be so great if there was a government program like SNAP that would help these people, but there are gaps, and so we're trying to fill in gaps that we really don't have the capacity to fill, and that has been a real struggle, and I think it's been really hard having situations where you're seeing people who really need help, and you're just we're all just individuals. We just do not have the capacity to get you housing, affordable housing, I think that's been the biggest struggle. But yeah, we're based out of San Jose, so that's kind of what that community has been struggling with.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, my name is Gary, and I'm a nurse, and I'm old, and I'm tired. And my husband, who just went to the bathroom, we've been probably doing this work for, I don't know, seems like about 45 or 50 years maybe. And the most recent organization that we work with is a group called Neighborhood Hands. A lot of the work we do doesn't specifically target the queer community, but given that some estimates are as high as 40 or 50% of homeless youth are queer, so they're certainly there. I think it's a mutual aid organization. I haven't looked at it through that lens, but there's a local business person who provides money for unhoused people to do a couple hours of work, and then after they finish the work, there's kind of a resource fair, and each of the kind of tabling groups are different organizations that have come together. So there's somebody providing clothing, somebody providing dog food, somebody providing legal advice, somebody providing social work and housing. We are nurses, so we provide wound care and first aid. There's sometimes some clinics who come and do immunizations, that kind of thing. There's eyeglasses. So I think that's a mutual aid event, and I think it started with this businessman who runs a paint shop, and he's the guy who actually gives the money to whenever people do a couple hours worth of work. And it's every other Saturday, and we were over at Guadalupe Park. We're still there, even though they've cleared out all the homeless people there. And I'm pretty sure that that's it. But one thing that was up on one of your slides that struck me was this idea of not having a singleness of purpose. I think that that sometimes that can be that can go down a dark rabbit hole, because singleness of purpose actually works, and it has been proven over and over again by many organizations. Alcoholics Anonymous is probably the classic example, and Red Cross is another one. But I think sometimes some organizations that I have worked with over the years, especially during the awful AIDS years, when they started to really split their focus and try to be everything to everybody, they actually dissolved and fell apart. So I think singleness of purpose actually has a value, and it has been studied, I think, quite extensively.
Yeah, I think that the approach that I think I would recommend is like you need so many different tools in your toolbox. No one approach is necessarily going to be correct. And I agree with you. Like, I've been part of nonprofits where there's been significant mission drift or like splitting of purpose, and that can be a real challenge. But I do think that having a space where we can recognize like the wholeness and messiness of the different pieces of people's lives and talk about them and organize folks around addressing them, I do think that also has a place and is valuable. But I agree completely. There's a way to do things, and it needs to be skillful and studied, and not that approach is not going to work for everything, for sure.
Hi, I'm Song. I do peer support counseling for the queer community, and I don't think what I do is necessarily mutual aid. I think it's a nonprofit organization, but I talk to so many queer people from all over the country, even in Canada. And I feel like sometimes the need for mutual aid is also just for people to know about it so they can participate in. Because here in the Bay Area, we're very privileged with like all the resources and events going on, but I see more and more people a lot of times from smaller areas, and they don't really know where to go, and finding a hard time to find communities around them. And we, like as the peer support hotline, we have like a database that we can look up and provide some resources for them. But a lot of times they themselves living in the local area, they don't know where to go. So I think the outreach is like probably a lot needed.
Yeah.
But I also recognize the problem of like a lot of the mutual aid needs are, the pressing issues are monetary issues, so that a lot of the organizations, especially the grassroots one, are not able to solve them.
Totally. I know you had a hand up.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Fernanda, and I am, and my pronouns are she, her. And we started a mutual aid group via WhatsApp back in 2022. The majority of the people in the group was, they were immigrants from Colombia. We started seeing a lot of folks coming from I'm originally from there. So something that I have not seen in like the 30 years that I've been in the Bay Area, and with a few folks that were, friends, people that I have worked in the past, created this group that grew to like 900 folks at one point, and we used that group to share information, resources, specifically in Santa Clara County, because the majority of the folks were coming here to San Jose, or not here, but in San Jose. And one of the issues that we encountered was at that point, the lack of resources, specifically for this community. And the reason we created the group was, or that the group was created, was one, to share those resources. And the second thing that we did it was to make sure that folks were kind of like aware, or we also wanted to know why so many people were coming to San Jose, which was so interesting in a way where this city had never been kind of like in the map. The majority of Colombians actually emigrate to Florida, New York, Texas, and so it was something interesting for us to know, and also the county wanted to know. So we use the kind of like that group as a source of info for the county, but also for our own purposes. And in no way am, somebody who is I had experience with nonprofits, but it was not in the way that we were given money or anything like that. It was more for resources. But one of the things that I wanted to share with you is this group is still up. I still kind of like manage the WhatsApp group. It has diminished in the number of people because we noticed that a lot of folks there, because of their immigration status, one, they were afraid to share info, and so we didn't know who they were. The names were usually like a emoji, so there was a lot of anonymity. We started hearing that people were tired of being kind of constantly bombarded with information. I was always asked questions about immigration as if I was a lawyer, and that was a lot to take in. Also, the stories were very difficult. Sometimes they were in detention centers and emotionally charged. And the part of the mutual aid that I feel is hard to do is that we are all volunteers, and we're all not working or prepared to answer all these questions. And also, people get tired. Also get, one of the things that happened in the group was people taking advantage from folks because they will say, they started sending, I'm a lawyer, or I have my own insurance. And then because it was in that group, people felt like, oh, if Fernanda knows this person, it must be legit, right? And because it was shared. So then we found out that there were some people getting scammed through that group. And then at the same time, we know of people kind of being contacted individually and directly. So I also wanted to kind of pinpoint that folks that are doing mutual aid end up kind of handling things that are deeper than what we expected when we had the initial idea. And we didn't want folks to take advantage. So we also see it, and with this I'm going to close, as a way of people promoting their own businesses. Because then they create, like they sell arepas, or they do nails, or they do hair, and it's good in a way, but at the same time, we wanted to kind of like keep those norms in the group of like, this is just for services and requests. And we did it a lot at the beginning to share like clothing, and people just coming with like the clothes on their bags and nothing else. So it was used also to share like that initial support. So my question to you is, since this was a very virtual mutual aid group, what kind of like best practices or things that you could share for specifically groups like this, but also to avoid those type of scams that perhaps indirectly happen through this process?
Yeah, it's a great. I'm so sorry. I have like a frog in my throat.
And before you start, I just want to let you know that we can go up to 12:10.
Oh, great.
So just
What time
if
is it
people
now?
are, like, we have about 5 minutes left on the standard session, but if people want to stick around and keep listening to all the questions and everything, please do.
Sure. Yeah, I think those are like, I think very common problems in these kinds of groups. Like, mutual aid groups are not easy to do, and like they are, vulnerable to all sorts of things like that, especially because the people who show up, and I think this is true across like the queer and trans nonprofit infrastructure too, like the people who show up to do this work are not here because we have like a PhD in how to do this stuff. Like, we're here because we see what our community needs and we want to step up and like try to meet the moment in whatever way we can. So the more I think we can work together to learn about like what are the pitfalls, of this type of work. And there's a whole section of this book that talks about exactly that. And this is the book that I've been quoting from a lot. But you can buy it, you can buy it online if you want. There's also like free copies that you can download. Of course, because it's mutual aid. So like you can get it, just search for it online, find a free copy. Like if you want to see what's in it, I have a copy with me. It's totally marked up. But most of the book is about this sort of thing. Like, what are the common challenges of mutual aid and working together? What crops up with this model? And what are some ways that you can, what are some strategies to avoid them and to, fix them when they're happening. Every model, I think, has these challenges. Obviously, nonprofits and charities have their own challenges. Mutual aid certainly does, especially because no one really teaches you how to do it. Like, the institutions that we have, I think, have been incentivized to not support people to mobilize on their own for a lot of reasons. But there are definitely resources around that, and like, also happy to talk to you after the session to show you what some of the book says and some other ideas. But that's so exciting, 900 people. It sounds like you guys have been doing a lot of really good work. I guess I have two other feelings about that, which, like, these are just, I am like not the authority on mutual aid. Like, this is just something that we're focused on doing, and I have my own opinions about it. But I will say, I think making it fun, like, you have to make the revolution irresistible. Like, throw parties, make it fun, have good food, have like good music. It's one of the reasons why I think the Street Fair Coalition is so viable, is because this is a group of people that like knows how to throw parties. Like, I just got to our warehouse like 2 days ago for a meeting, and there is a giant disco buffalo in the parking lot. I was like, who is this? Like, who brought this here? And that is the type of thing that makes me feel alive, that makes me want to show up, that like, I think this is like spiritual work in a lot of ways. And like, I think we have a spiritual need as humans to connect with other people, to be connected with our world, to be creative, to create the world we want to live in. And I think that's what makes this work feel alive, and what keeps me coming to this work. And I think we'll keep other people showing up, make it fun. So much social justice work has felt so awful for so long. Like, I talked to so many lay people and they're like, well, I want to help, but I showed up to this space and someone was like really mean to me immediately. And I'm like, yep, that sounds right. Like, cool, great. So how are you going to like build your revolution by being a jerk? That's just, no one's going to want to hang out with you, let alone like work with you. So I think learning how to be together, learning how to, be human together, I think that's essentially what this is. So I will do a pitch. We would love to have anyone who wants to come to this. I know it is like very far away from here. But if you want to take a picture, like, we would love to have you. It's in Oakland. We're working with a couple of, ABO Comics is an abolitionist group focused on queer and trans folks who are incarcerated. Donor Organizer Hub teaches people how to raise funds from grassroots sources. So the three of us are hosting the first one, but it's going to be a rotating group of mutual aid groups who are hosting these monthly. And if you would love to get connected, or if you would like to get connected, we would love to be connected with you. We've been working with groups in different areas who are interested in setting up sort of mutual aid hubs and connecting with other folks who are doing this work because we are so siloed. You know, please feel free to. This goes to a survey, like a Google form where you can enter your information. We have a weekly call with folks. Right now, there are folks from Dallas and Denver who are joining, who are kind of building their own mutual aid hubs, and we're kind of skilling each other up and seeing, you know, where we can learn things from each other. Seems like a lot of people in this room have a lot of skills that, like, I certainly would love to learn from and work together. So please feel free to scan this and be in touch. We'd love to hear from you. And that's it. Are we? Oh, right on time. All right. Thank you. Yes, yeah, of course.
All right, thank you so much. So just a quick announcement, as we move over to lunch, if you do have any dietary restrictions, please connect with the staff or servers or or even the chef who might be on site right now. If you do not have a dietary restriction, we would really appreciate it if you would refrain from taking the dietary restriction meals, just so we can make sure that those who have registered for them or that need them are able to eat with us today. Let's see. Is there any last second burning question or comments? Sorry. And this will be real quick.
How do you define needs versus wants in mutual aid?
That is such an interesting question. I feel like wants are valid, I guess. Like, I want to, you know, I think maybe that's part of some of the, like, non-profit-y charity thinking of, like, you don't really need this, you know, you could survive on less, or you just need food, or you need your basics or whatever. Like, I don't want to, like, live on my basics. Like, I want to have fun. I want to have a joyful life with, like, you know, the stuff that I like, and I think that's okay. So I guess I would encourage embracing the things you want and working together to create things you want. I mean, I think it's also interesting from a queer and trans perspective because, like, I think straight people often think the things we want are not needs, and that the way we live in the world is indulgent and, like, irritating, and we don't have to be so loud, and we don't have to wear such, you know, the kinds of clothes we like to wear, and that's just, you know, a want. Thank you so much for coming. But I say, you know, fuck it, live how you want to live. And I think that is okay and should be embraced. And your wants, yeah, your wants are valid, I guess. Yeah.
All right, and let's give a warm round of applause for Jack. Thank you. All right, let's go eat.